first temple ever built over in Jerusalem was the Temple of Solomon. But see, people are led to believe that this Solomon was the biblical Solomon.
Correct.
No, it was a real live person by the name of Solomon Bar Isaac called Rashid. He was the one that financed, like I mentioned before, financed Godfrey of the Bouillon and his brother Baldwin in the first army coming out of out of northern France into Turkey.
Now, how do, because you give credence to Christianity and to Christians, but are they made up because they're in the Bible? The Old Testament is the Christians, and the New Testament is the book of the Christians. How is it different? I mean, how am I going to separate? You give credit to one, but yet you say that is made up.
Same thing. You mean the incarnated names?
No, Christianity. You say that Christianity, that there were Monforsite Christians, and there were actually Christians, and there was a Christian church, there was a Coptic church, and you give credence to that.
Yes.
But yet at the same time, you say that the whole Bible is fictitious, it's made up.
Two different entities. Religion, the creation of the religion, was done by time, people, places, and events, which is called history. That's the ingredients for history. The four ingredients for history is time, people, places, and events. That has nothing to do with the literature. See, you and I can write literature, and we can predate it 10,000 years ago. All we need is a system, or some kind of system to put it in. Okay? So you have to separate the actual history that was created by people from the fictitious literature that has nothing to do with each other. Two different things. But you have to, when you're dealing with history, not literature now, there are timelines that is involved. Okay? Yes, Christianity began in the 5th century, starting at the Council of Ephesus, 431. When they took from our ancient Egyptian divine triad, Isis out of that triad, and created a fictitious creature by the name of the Virgin Mary, giving this Virgin Mary the Theotokos, a title called the Theotokos, which is to mean the Mother of God. God who? This Serapis, who is known today as Jesus the Christ. The two creatures were amalgamated together. Okay? And once that amalgamation of the two creatures, the created creature, the Virgin Mary, with the created title of the Theotokos, the Mother of Jesus, or the Mother of Serapis, or the Mother of God, came about, then the Melkite Coptic Egyptians said that this now is the Messiah, or in Coptic spoken Greek, this is the Christos, or in English, the Christ. See, that's history. Now, prior to that, if someone come up and say that Constantine, or during the time of Constantine, that was Christian, historically incorrect. See, if someone says that there were Christians in the 1st century, historically correct, incorrect. Sorry. If someone come up and say that there were Christians in the 2nd century, historically incorrect. 3rd century, historically incorrect. 4th century, historically incorrect. When did you get Christians or Christianity? First you have to have a Christ. You don't get a Christ until the 5th century at the Council of Ephesus. You don't get Christianity until the close of the Council of Chalcedon in 451. That's history. You don't get the building of a church, or the world's first Christian church, until 532, when Justinian and his wife built the Hagia Sophia. They finished it in 537. That's history. Now then you have the literature. That's another history altogether. Because it took, in order to create this literature, it took time, people, places, and events through a process of time, people, places, and events. Now, in 1475, you have a Old Testament. But it was created by Moses Maimonides, or Moses Maimon, in the 12th century. He began to write the first 5 books of Moses, or the Pentateuch, or the Old Testament, in 1180. You see? Which was nothing but an appendix of the writing, or the formulated writing of Rashi, who wrote Sefer HaYasa literature. Sefer means books, Ha means of, and Yasa means of the upright ones. See? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, those were the upright ones. See, that's your foundation for the Old Testament. Then that was from Rashi coming out in the late 11th and early 12th century, writing and creating the formula for Judaism. That formula housed what is known as the Old Testament. Then his grandson, Jacob ben Meir, who was a Baal Tosafot writer. The word Tosafot means a writer of appendix. Okay? He began to add appendix to his grandfather's writing. Then here come, right after Jacob ben Meir, here come Moses Maimonides, or Moses Maimon. He was a Tosafot writer. He began to add appendix to Jacob ben Meir's writing and his grandfather's writing, Rashi. So today we have an Old Testament that was first printed in 1475, which contained the first 5 books of Moses. Moses who? Moses Maimonides. But they don't tell you that. They say the first 5 books of Moses and make the believer in the religious community believe that there was a Moses living in Egypt, etc., etc. There's never been a Moses living in Egypt. Okay? But that's another subject we're gonna take up before this program is over with. About a non-Moses, by a non-slaves building the pyramids. But that we're going to get into that. So I was giving you a progression of how the religion came about, Christianity, how the religious literature came about, 2 different entities. So you don't ever try to put them together like that. You separate them, then you can see, when you separate them, how each came into existence.
Okay, then tell me this, because if you go back dealing with Christian literature, supposedly Christian literature, you get Saint Augustus, who's supposed to have been African. You get who's supposed to have written a lot of the Christian literature, liturgy that we read. You get the Pope. You get Rome. What is that place where the Pope is? All of that. I mean, you get structure. The Vatican, you get structure, but all of that was supposed to have came out of Christianity.
Suppose, like you said, it came by way of literature. You know that the literature that is used to write Christian literature, or the base foundation of Christian literature, it is called patristic theology, or patristic philosophy. That's the literature that they use to write Christian literature with. Okay? You mentioned Augustine. Augustine was supposed to have been one of the fathers of the church.
Correct.
Like Eusebius Pamphili, or Eusebius of Caesarea, supposed to have been one of the fathers of the church. In fact, the Roman Catholic Church today said that their theology, their religious theology, is based off of St. Augustine. Okay? There's never been an Augustine. There's never been a Eusebius. Because if you, I'll tell you what you do, an individual go to their library and you go and find a set of new Catholic encyclopedias, and you look up there, Fathers of the Church, and they will give you a list of supposed fathers of the church. And every one of those fathers of the church, they give you a date with the birth date and the death date of those supposed fathers of the church. I think it's roughly around 28 or 30 or 30-something names that are listed in that list of fathers of the church of the Roman. And the church, when they say the church, they mean the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? So when they give you those dates, birth date and death dates of those names, guess what, Clemson? All of those names predate the 5th century. See? Now mind you, if you're a serious student of history, you have to know when this Christ was created. Christ was created at the Council of Ephesus in 431. So prior to 431, you had no Christ or no Christianity or no Christian church. The world's first Christian church, I'll go back, was built in Constantinople, Turkey, known today as the Hagia Sophia. Okay? There was no church in Rome. Okay? That was the world's first Christian church. Okay? Now, so when you study the church fathers, all of those names with birth dates and death dates predates the 5th century, predates Christianity, predates Christ, predates the building of the world's first Christian church. You see, that's history. Okay? So that's all based off of patristic writings.
What is patristic writing?
It's a form of writing that is used to write literature of and for the religion called Christianity. Like they have Perky of both is a form of writing used to write literature for the religion called Judaism. The Hadith, the Sunnah, the Ishnad is a form of literature that is used to write the literature for Islam. See, every religion has its own body of and form and formulation to write their particular literature from. See, so now this patristic writings, in patristic philosophy and theology comes these particular church fathers, or the names of the supposed church fathers. But like I said before, none of these names existed in human form because they all predate Christianity. You see that?
Well, what was going on, that they had a council of Ephesus in which Christianity, they had to have something going. Well, can we go back to the Romans and come back up? When the Greeks and Romans came into Egypt, what were the Egyptians worshiping? And how did the Romans adapt into play with the worship or the religion or the way of life, spirituality of the ancient Egyptians? And how did they carry that forward? Because you said that the Romans was feeding Christians to the lions and all that. I mean, try to give me some understanding.
That's tradition. Okay. Prior to the Europeans coming into Africa and into Egypt, the first known European, like I mentioned, was Alexander the Greek. During the time of antiquity, the peoples throughout the whole entire world, living wherever geographical land area that they may have lived, had no religion, practiced no religion. There was no religion, no place on earth. There was never a religion in Africa. The ancient Egyptians did not practice a religion. They had a spiritual way of life. The Africans throughout Africa did not practice a religion. They had a spiritual way of life.
Well, what are those gods?
That's an after fact. Okay, that's an after fact. So we'll get into that. But let me proceed. Okay. The ancient Egyptians paid homage to one of their ancestors. The Africans paid homage to their ancestors. Okay? To the ancient Egyptians and the Africans paid homage to nature. They understood cosmic laws, cosmic order. They called it, today it is said that they call it Ma'at. Truth, justice, peace, love, and wisdom. Okay? So they knew and practiced cosmic order, cosmic laws of the universe. They knew that. So that's how they were able to build their great and grand and glorious culture and civilization, by knowing and using and practicing those particular laws. That's how they built the pyramid. That's how they did everything, how they created mathematics, how they created science, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay? But no religion. Here come the European into Africa, in Egypt. They wanted to be made part of the sacred society, or be made part of the sacred temples throughout Egypt. The ancient Egyptians did not take any foreigners into their sacred temples. They rejected. Alexander came in 332, lived 9 years, died 323 BC. His army general, Ptolemy I Lagi, called Sotar, took over the rule of Egypt. He wanted to get himself admitted into the priest society, but was rejected. So he found a group of priests and priestesses in Memphis, Egypt. And he asked them to take his image and make it into a god. And they took two of their deities, Osiris and Apis, and made a composite of the two, and gave this Ptolemy I, this Greek ruler, gave him the title and the name Serapis, or Osiris, supposedly making him into a god by giving him an Osiris-like spirit. He still was rejected by the priest society throughout throughout Egypt. And at that point, he began to confiscate all of their divine scroll manuscripts throughout Egypt in those sacred temples, and he began to close them down. He housed all of those divine scroll manuscripts in Memphis, Egypt, in that temple that made his image into a god. That's all in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity. I walk you through the historical origin of Christianity. And this, what I just got through saying, is some of the things that I've written in my book. So I could take up a lot of time explaining to you the process of how Christianity came about, but it would be faster for you or anyone who is looking at this video who wants to know about the historical origin of Christianity step by step by way of historical process than by my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, the revised edition.
It's good. We can move. But I want to look at Rome and how, what was happening, in terms of, if not worship, but what did the Romans, how did they worship, or how did they deal with the spirituality, their spirituality, the Egyptian spirit? Because this is the second, the continuation of Greeks. You said the Greeks and the Romans were the same people. Mm-hmm. So please continue in explaining, because I'm looking at this now, and you tell me if I'm right, as the first time Europeans are coming in and penetrating into Egypt, and this continues on up to today. I mean, we lose Egypt. These Europeans continue to grow and to expand. I'm just looking at the progression of history, but I want to look at it as interplaying with the religion, because the religion plays such an important role in it, because we later on get out of that the Catholic Church, and I just want to know how that developed, how that ends up being all over the world, and it's supposed to have came out of this Council of Nicaea, and how did it develop, what were people worshiping then? I mean, they say that the Romans fed Christians to lions and all of that. Just kind of explain all that stuff. Was it true?
Well, no, it's untrue. But my book, like I said, explains the progression of how Christianity came about. And I will take you into the various council meetings, the ecumenical council meetings that did exist in Northeast Africa, in Turkey, such as the Council of Nicaea I, which is called the Nicene Council, or the Homogeous Council. Okay, the second council was called the Council of Constantinople I, 381. The third council was the Council of Ephesus, 431. The fourth council was the Council of Chalcedon, 451. The fifth council was the Council of Constantinople, 553. I'll walk you through that, but I think where you're getting a little confused is that you, among other people throughout the world, think that it was a church in Rome. Never was a church in Rome. Not until the 15th century. 15th century. There's no church. When I said no church, I mean it was no seat of Christianity. There was no Vatican. There was no seat of Christianity. The Vatican in Rome today is the seat of Christianity. There was no Vatican until the 15th century. Okay? So when the Greeks and the Romans came in, what they did was to assimilate the culture and the civilization and the ways of the ancient Egyptian by way of assimilation. See that?
Yeah.
Okay. So no church now. You don't get a church nowhere on earth until the 6th century, when Justinian and his wife Theodora built the world's first Christian church, which is known as the Hagia Sophia, the Church of the Holy Wisdom, which is another name for Jesus the Christ. Built in 532, finished in 537. But in the meantime, there was no church in the Vatican as being the seat of Christianity. The seat of Christianity was in Northeast Africa, in Constantinople, in a church and university that is known as the Hagia Sophia, that served as the world's first Christian church and the world's first European university. And the teaching staff at the Hagia Sophia were Africans. They were male Coptic Egyptian Africans. And they're the ones that taught the Europeans. You see, George M. James came out with Stolen Legacy, saying that the Greeks studied with the ancient Egyptians. That's historically incorrect. Because the ancient Egyptians would never ever take a foreigners into their priest society to teach them anything, their sacred society. Secondly, the Greeks had no alphabet. They were illiterate people. Third, they were uncivilized savages. So what are you going to do if they took a Greek who was uncivilized, savage, who had no alphabet, and take them into their sacred temples to teach them? What are they going to teach them? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Kindergarten. They didn't do that. So the first learning institution for the Europeans that ever existed on planet Earth was the Hagia Sophia. And the teachers' staff was Africans. Okay? Now, in the meantime, there was no church in Rome that could be identified as the seat of Christianity. No, it was in Constantinople, Turkey, the Hagia Sophia. Now, Justinian wanted to become head of that church after he built it. And the only way that he could become head of that church and have the ecclesiastical power over that church, as well as political power, he had to take the donation of Constantine building the Hagia Sophia. Agapetus I, he was the African, the Melchite African, that had ecclesiastical authority by way of the donation of Constantine. See? The donation of Constantine is explained in my book. But he had ecclesiastical authority by way of the donation of Constantine. The donation of Constantine was a donation or an agreement given to Sylvester I by one Constantine in 313 and 14 ABCE. Okay? And that gave the Coptic community in Turkey and throughout Egypt, because Egypt was part of the Byzantine Empire, ecclesiastical authority over each other. In other words, over by the donation of Constantine being given to Sylvester I, who was a Melkite Coptic Egyptian. Constantine gave him his imperial authority on a temporal basis, meaning that he wanted Sylvester to get the rest of the Coptic Egyptians to worship this Serapis image that is known today as Jesus the Christ. Mm-hmm. See, from the time of Ptolemy I, Lagi, who the image was made as into Serapis, every Ptolemy and Ptolemaic ruler and Roman ruler who sat on the throne to rule Egypt sat on the throne as the vicar of Serapis, just like the Pope in Rome sits on the throne of Peter. Mm-hmm. Okay, by way of the supposed authority of Peter to be the vicar of Christ. Mm-hmm. You see, so now the donation of Constantine was very important, because he gave his imperial emblems over an authority to this Melkite Coptic African Sylvester I, and made Sylvester the head HNIC in modern terms, okay, over the rest of the Coptic Egyptian. All he wanted for himself was to be baptized and made part of that community. You see? So that donation of Constantine stayed into power, ecclesiastical power, from 313 all the way up until 553. Mm-hmm. You see? Mm-hmm. When Justinian took it back at that point with the help of another African, Theodore of Cities. Mm-hmm. You see? But that's all in my book. Mm-hmm. But anyway, you see? So now, during the time of Justinian, prior to him building the Hagia Sophia, Agapetus I, who was a Melkite Coptic African Egyptian, had ecclesiastical power. But guess what happened to Agapetus? He died mysteriously because Justinian had him killed. Then the ecclesiastical authority, by way of the donation of Constantine, went to one Silverius. And guess what happened to Silverius?
He was killed.
No. He was brought up on charges for treason against the government. Justinian had his army general and the general's wife to bring treason charges against Silverius. So he was eliminated. He eventually died. Okay? Then the donation of Constantine went to the only African true pope of the Roman Catholic Church, and that was Vigilius.
What period is this?
5th century.
5th century.
I'm sorry, 6th century. 6th century. Mm-hmm. See, Vigilius. Okay? Wait now, let me get through, because I'm about to tell you something very, very important to clear your mind up now about this. So if I had to tell you all this, I had to bring you through a progression of history so you can really understand how the picture began to evolve. Right. Okay. Now, here come, during the time of Vigilius, Justinian had completed building the world's first Christian church, the Hagia Sophia. So by Vigilius having ecclesiastical authority, that made him officially the world's first pope of that church. Okay? He was the world's first pope of the Christian church. Okay? But he was an African. See? And Justinian, by him building that church, wanted to take back the donation of Constantine. You know what they did? They tried, with the help of Theodore of Cities, a Melkite Coptic Uncle Tom African, told Justinian how to get rid of Vigilius. You know what they tried to do? They tried to tell him, they went to Vigilius and said, listen, I want you, Vigilius, to have communion with the Monophysites. The Monophysites was the enemy of the Christians, the Diaphysitic Christians. Because the Monophysites said that that Christ, that the Diaphysitic Christians worship, had no human nature. You see? So he wanted Vigilius to have communion with him. That was the trick. Vigilius didn't fall for that. You see? So they eventually hounded him until they killed him. And Justinian got control of the donation of Constantine. And he, by getting control of the donation of Constantine, he got control of ecclesiastical authority of that particular church. Mm-hmm. Now this is what's happening. Now listen to this now. When he got ecclesiastical authority, he himself appointed patriarchs of the Hagia Sophia. Okay? Not popes. See? Patriarch. A patriarch is an individual who is a bishop of the Hagia Sophia. And he also appointed the patriarch of Constantinople. But you got two different patriarchs. You got two different factions over there in that region of the world, in Turkey and in Egypt, all in Northeast Africa. The two factions is one, you have a Diaphysitic faction arguing the Monophysitic faction. The Monophysites said that this Christ had no human nature. The Diaphysitic said that Christ had two natures, a spiritual nature and a human nature. See, you got those two arguments, right? So to try to keep peace, he appointed the patriarch of the Hagia Sophia and the patriarch of Constantinople. The patriarch of Constantinople was a Monophysite bishop. The patriarch of the Hagia Sophia was a Diaphysitic bishop. See that? Mm-hmm. See? Just like the Republicans and the Democrats. That's what it was. Now, the Hagia Sophia and the patriarch of the Hagia Sophia represented the West. The West being what? Europe. See? No Christian church, no seat of Christianity was over there. The seat of Christianity was in Northeast Africa, in Constantinople, known as the Hagia Sophia. Okay? See? So now, you have to also understand that was Jacob Baradaeus, also a.k.a. as James Barraday, around. Jacob Baradaeus was a pet of Theodora's. See? She financed his living, his existence, but he was a Monophysite. Mm-hmm. But when, the Hagia Sophia was built in what year? 532. In 532, something else happened in history. What happened in history was the Nicareids, Nikka. The Nicareids began. What was the rioting about? These are European Arabs living over in Constantinople, in and around Turkey, in and around Constantinople, rather. They broke out into a riot. Okay? The same year that Justinian began to build the Hagia Sophia. And Justinian, the riot got so intense and so bad that he was about to give up his throne until his wife Theodora told him, said, no, you don't give up your throne. You go and get our army general and let him take care of the situation. The army general of Justinian rounded up 30,000 men, women, and children and took them and put them in the Hippodrome. The Hippodrome is like a big stadium, sports stadium. Mm-hmm. And they killed 30,000 men, women, and children. And that brought that riot down. Had Justinian given up his throne, his Byzantine empire, at that time, the Hagia Sophia would have never been completed or built, because that was the very first year he began building it in 532 when that riot broke out among those European Arabs. Okay? Now, let me go a little further. A rich prince by the name of Ibn Harith Gabala came to Theodora, the wife of Justinian, and said, listen, send someone to evangelize among my people, among us Arabs. See that? And she went and got one of her pets, Jacob Baradaeus, known as Jacob Barade. Okay? And she built for him in 543 a church that is known today as the Jacobite church. See, when let's go back in history, when Ptolemy I Lagi, when his image was refused by the Coptic Egyptians, priest society, or the ancient Egyptian priest society in Egypt, he closed those temples down, but he forbid any ancient Egyptian to build any type of buildings or building for the purpose of religious worship or for any type of spiritual gathering. They had to resort to their homes for spiritual fellowshipping and to the cemeteries where they buried their dead. Okay? Now, so therefore, all the way up until that time, we're talking about in 323 BCE, all the way up until 543 ACE, when Theodora and Justinian built a church in Syria for Jacob Baradaeus. And later that church was named the Jacobite Church. It was a Coptic church. So you want to know when the world's first Coptic church was erected? 543 in Syria. But guess what kind of church it was? It was a monophysite church, not a Christian church, not a diaphysitic Christian. It was a monophysite church. See, this is where our people in the African community get thrown off. See, they think that the Coptic church was in Ethiopia. No. No, no. See, because they always assimilate Coptic with Christianity.
Right.
No, no.
Correct.
That's, okay?
Yeah.
See, but the Coptic church, the world's first Coptic church, was built in Syria by Theodora and Justinian for Jacob Baradaeus, a.k.a. as James Barade, in 543, for him to use as a headquarters to gather his missionary group, which contained 160 bishops and clergymen and women, to go out among the European Arabs and evangelize among them. Because those European Arabs did not want to become Christians because they were not satisfied with the Byzantine emperors. And the reason why they were not satisfied with the Byzantine emperors, it goes all the way back to Anastasius I in 517. In 517, the Byzantine ruler Anastasius I condemned and stopped gladiator competition in the hippodrome, in the stadium. And that was a sport just as popular as football in America today. Can you imagine the President of the United States outlawing and abolishing football? This whole country would go up in smoke.
Yeah.
You see? So now, let me don't say nothing. Let me go on. So, he abolished gladiator competition. When he died in 518, his successor, his nephew, Justinian, came into power. And he kept that abolishment in place. When Justinian died, his nephew came into power, Justinian I, and he kept that going. That's the reason why the Nika riots came about in 532, because they were all mad at the Byzantine ruler for stopping the gladiator competition over there, you see? And I'm bringing that all out in my book called The Historical Origin of Islam. There's never been a man that ever walked the earth in human form blending with the Prophet Muhammad. You see that? Now, Justinian has built the Hagia Sophia, right? He wants everybody to join and become a Christian. And these Arabs says, no, no way. Okay? So that's when Theodora got Jacob Bardaeus, her African Melkite pet, to go and evangelize among these Arabs. So Jacob Bardaeus, after Theodora, built the world's first Coptic church, which was a monophysite church in Syria in 543. He got 160 bishops and other clergymen and females. And the females, the females were nuns. They were called nuns. Or, better known, they were called virgins. Because the Melkite Coptic religious community practiced celibacy. The exterior Coptic religious community practiced celibacy. Jacob Bardaeus and his group, they all practiced celibacy. And I told you that the teaching staff in the Hagia Sophia comprised of the African, Melkite Africans, right? They all practiced celibacy. And the Hagia Sophia is nothing but an extension of Western Christianity in Rome. The seat of the Vatican, or the seat of Christianity, is in the Vatican. And the Pope and his hierarchy, what do they practice? They practice supposedly celibacy, don't they? You see, that's where they got it from, the African religious community. Okay? Now, when James Barday began to evangelize among these Arabs, he was teaching them a monophysitic theology. See, they were monophysites. They did not believe in the two natures of this Christ. They were all monophysites. Okay? And then through the years, they began to physically fight the Byzantine emperors. Physically. The African monophysites only argued among themselves. They never related or stooped to violence. See, they argued among themselves by way of a polemic. But these Arabs, these European Arabs, who are known in history as the Saracen Arabs and the Seljukian Turks, they fought in physical form to try to destroy the Byzantine Empire, try to destroy the Hagia Sophia, etc., etc.
Just tell me, who are the Arabs? What are they made up of? Are they Africans and?
No, they're Indo-Europeans.
Arabs, Indo-Europeans.
The Arabs today are considered Indo-Europeans, a mixture of Europeans and Indians, Pakistanians, Afghanians, and etc., etc. Okay, but originally, when Alexander the Greek came into Egypt in 332 BCE, the Europeans began to come into Africa and into Egypt and into Turkey and into Iran and Iraq in large numbers. They came out of the Slavic southern areas of Europe. They came out of Bulgaria, They came out of Yugoslavia, Albania, Hungary. They came out of Greece. They came out of southern Russia via the way into Iran and Iraq. Okay? And then through the years, the people of India, under the influence of Islam, began to mingle.
Under the influence of
Islam, yes.
But Islam don't go back that far.
That's right. But I'm saying in later years, I said, under the influence of monophysitic teachings, put it like that, that later became Islam. See?
Okay.
See, in order to, if you ask a Muslim, in order for you to understand anything about Islam, you really have to know the historical origin of Christianity first.
Correct.
And then you got to know the historical origin of the monophysites. See, so from monophysitic Christianity or from monophysitic theology came Mohammedanism / Islam. But that goes into another story. But let me finish here, then I'll let you continue. So you see, Clemson, there was no seat for Christianity in Europe, in Rome. Okay? Now, with all that fighting going over there, I'm jumping ahead now. We're going into the time of the Crusades. Okay? With all that fighting going in over there, in that region of the world, we're talking about Northeast Africa and Turkey and Egypt and all across North Africa. These Seljukian Turks fighting the Byzantine rulers and fighting the other Europeans coming into that region to try to take land. Okay? Under the disguise of trying to say we're coming over here to protect Christianity. They could give less than a damn about Christianity. They came over there to take land. That's what they wanted, like I explained prior to that. Now, the Hagia Sophia, the patriarch of the Hagia Sophia, I told you, represented Europe or Western Christianity. The patriarch of Constantinople represented the Monophysites. You heard of the Greek Orthodox Church?
Yes.
Or the Eastern Orthodox Church?
Right.
The Greek Orthodox Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, anything that says Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, etc., that means that that church followed the guidelines of one Photius. Okay, Photius was a patriarch of Constantinople who was a Monophysite patriarch. Photius in the 9th century, 869 and 870. One, he did not recognize the patriarch of the Hagia Sophia. Did not recognize him. They argued all the time. Number two, he refused to accept the filioque in the creed. And the word filioque means he refused to accept the Son, which is known as Christ, in the creed. What creed? The Homogeneous Creed, or the Nicene Creed, that was created in 325. And he refused to practice celibacy. So now in 1054 comes a Greek Orthodox Church, okay, using the formula or the doctrine of the Patriarch of Constantinople. In other words, the Greek Orthodox Church refused to accept Christ. And that's all been changed today. But I'm talking about back in the middle of the 11th century, 1054. They refused to accept the filioque, or the filioque meaning Christ, as being the Son of God. And God was Osiris as being the God, coming out of the ancient Egyptian divine triad. Okay? See, so you have to understand that. See, a lot of people don't know that. They don't realize that. But to know the difference between the the patriarch of Constantinople and the patriarch of the Hagia Sophia. Okay, altogether different. Okay, now with all the fighting during the time of the Crusades, when the Seljukian Turks was really kicking butts over there, every army that came over there, they ran them out. You know, they was in control. Okay, so it was imminent that the Hagia Sophia was going to fall, was going to be destroyed. Okay, so therefore, the Europeans in Europe began to try to find and move the seat of Christianity out of Northeast Africa into Europe. You see that?
Yeah.
They knew that the Hagia Sophia was going to fall, because you had all that fighting going on over there. The Hagia Sophia was like an island surrounded by monophysites, by the enemy. Just a matter of time. So you know what they did? To prepare the Europeans in France, they began to build in 1163 the Church of Notre Dame. In 1230, they finished that church in Paris, France. That was going to be the seat of Christianity, but it never got off the ground for that purpose, even though they finished Notre Dame, and it's gone on to be just a regular church. Okay, but that was going to be the seat of Christianity. You see? Now, where was the ecclesiastical power of the seat of Christianity? Where? No. The Hagia Sophia.
Yeah, okay, yes.
You see that?
Turkey.
In Turkey. They're trying to, they know that it is just a matter of time before the Hagia Sophia was going to be destroyed. So they began to prepare another seat in Europe for it. That's when I told you they began to build the Church of Notre Dame in 1163 and finished it in 1230. But it didn't come off that way. But now, in the meantime, who had ecclesiastical power over that seat of Christianity, that church who had the seat of Christianity, was the Byzantine ruler. So John 8, I'm going to jump a little bit, John 8 in 1439, you know what he did? He merged the Eastern Church with the West. And at that point, he gave up ecclesiastical authority. In 1439. 6 years later, you know what they was doing? In Rome, on the outskirts of Rome, they was building St. Peter's Church, that is known as St. Peter's Basilica, who is today is the seat of European Roman Christianity. It's the seat of Roman Christianity in 1445. See that?
Yeah.
8 years after the beginning of St. Peter's Church, which took them 181 years to build what is known as the Vatican. They built it on the outskirts of Rome over the catacombs. They wanted to build over the catacombs because they wanted to build over a supposed tomb of Peter. Peter is the one that gives the Pope today the authority, the ecclesiastical authority to be the vicar of Christ. So he gets his authority from Peter. And if you go into the Vatican in St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope sits on his throne in front of steps leading down into the catacombs, where the supposed burial place of Peter took place. Never been a Peter. See, but this is what's happening today. So a lot of people think that this church has been over there all these years. No, as being the seat of Christianity. No. The seat of Christianity was in Northeast Africa in the Hagia Sophia. Okay?
Well, since you got up to 1000 and so forth, but isn't Islam supposed to have come about in 640 AD, somewhere around there? how does Islam interface with that?
See, that's what you're saying is you're using traditional literature.
Mm-hmm.
The stories that's attached in traditional religious Islamic literature.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that a Prophet Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570 and died in Medina and was buried in Medina in 632. That's tradition. There's never been a Prophet Muhammad. That's historically incorrect. Okay? My book, The Historical Origin of Islam, will bring all that out, dispel all of that. In my book, The Historical Origin of Islam, there's never been a man who walked away from human form by the name of Prophet Muhammad. I'm going to bring out some very shocking, surprising things to our African community. Okay? And I will go into that in detail.
And
Okay?
just give us a quick peek, just so I can know
Well,
where Islam comes from.
Yeah, Islam first comes from monophysitic Christianity. That's what you have to understand.
Yeah, I gathered that.
Okay.
It's kind of continuation.
Right,
of
it's a
what
continuation, see. Christ and Muhammad is one and the same. Christ has a body and a face in this icon or pictorial form. The pictorial form of the Prophet Muhammad is faceless. That means that, what did the Monophysites say about Christ? They say he had no human nature, right? Now they show you, they say that in Orthodox Islam, it's against the law to show any images of the Prophet Muhammad, right? But when they do show you an image of the Prophet Muhammad, and I got that in my book also, an image of the Prophet Muhammad, standing next to this icon Christ. When they show you an image of the Prophet Muhammad, it is faceless. So a person or an image without a face is what? A non-human.
Right.
See? So that goes back to the monophysitic doctrine of Christ not having a human nature. See? In my book also I'm bringing out that this icon of Christ was given through the process of history 5 names. First one was Serapis. The next one was Christ. The third one was Zeus. The fourth one was Jupiter. And the fifth one was Muhammad. See, Christ is also Muhammad. Became Muhammad the Christ in the 13th century. My book will explain all of that.
Can't wait for the book.
Okay? A lot of people are waiting for that book.
Yeah.
See, so my book will dispel all the myths concerning Islam, like my book dispels the myth pertaining to Christianity.
All right, we'll head out. Now, Brother Williams, you were saying how the Europeans managed to come in and get Africans to sell Africans into slavery.
First place you have to understand this, Clemson, is this. The plan was made outside of Africa by the Europeans. The plan being that they, the Europeans, designed a plan and designated a certain area or a certain country in Africa to go in and take the human cargo, which are Africans, out of Africa and take them away from the continent of Africa and place them in other parts of the world to make slaves out of them or whatever they wish to make out of these indigenous Africans. So the answer to that question would be that the Europeans created a plan first. This was nothing that was done haphazardly or by accident. They set out with a plan to do exactly what they did. So when they got to their designated country or place in Africa, they began to initiate their plan. And the plan was to take the indigenous Africans out of Africa and place them into a slave servitude position in what they call the New World, which is the United States of America. Okay? And they use trickery and bribery by offering trinkets and other foolishness and other artifacts and things to the head of that particular country or head of that tribe. That's how it was done. It was planned.
In terms of the African economy, it's been said that the Europeans undermined the already existing trade routes and African economic systems. Has your study shown you how this was done?
No, I mean the Europeans show you every day how it's done because they are doing and duplicating the same thing all over the world and have done it for many, many years. They set out, like I said before, and they plan their movement. This is nothing done haphazardly. So what I'm saying to you is that they call a meeting with the people who they're going to involve themselves into this plan. And they began to initiate the plan. They see what it takes to initiate the plan, who is designated in their group to do certain things, to bring this plan into realization, and they set out to do that. And they have the means and the whereabouts and the knowledge and the wisdom to do this. So it doesn't take a whole lot of knowledge and wisdom to go in and dominate and kill and destroy and terrorize people, but this is their nature. So this is all part of a plan that the Europeans had concocted to benefit themselves and dehumanize the Africans and other indigenous people around the world.
Good morning. We have the pleasure of being with Sister Arnetta Mayette Williams. Good morning.
Good
Sister
morning.
Arnetta.
How are you?
doing?
Great.
Good. You know, one of the things we've been doing is this program on the centralization of Africa in world history.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to ask you if you agree with that premise, and if so, why do you think that Africa is central in world history, the ancient Egyptians in particular?
Africa is very key because that is the beginning of civilization. That is the documentation that we have. Therefore, we cannot ignore Africa. It is our foundation for all of civilization throughout the world today, not only among the Africans, but among the Europeans as well, and all other groups throughout the world.
What do you think would happen if Africans, ancient Egyptians living here in the United States would change their view and their energy from worshiping white European images and pull away from that and begin to search for their own identity, say in the ancient Egyptian cosmology and worldview and the history? What do you think would happen?
Okay. Well, I think a lot of good things would happen.
What has happened?
First of all, focusing in on ancient Egypt, again, is very key because Egypt is known as the cradle of civilization, and the people who live there were and are indigenous Africans. And again, that is very key to our understanding and development as well as the rest of the world. Now, again, thinking in terms of a so-called religion, the ancient Egyptians, as you're aware, did not have religion per se. They had an understanding of nature. They were able to relate. And I think one of the reasons that they were able to relate so well, they did not have the religion clogging them up, okay, so to speak. There wasn't anything in their way. It was just them communing with the Creator, I would call it, and the nature around them and getting a thorough understanding of that. So I think that's number one, if we can begin to understand. I know oftentimes when the term God is spoken of, or goddesses, which is rarely spoken of, but thinking about those two terms, we think about ancient Egypt, okay, the gods and the goddesses. And again, I think there has been a tremendous misunderstanding. While many think of them as polytheistic, worshiping many gods, I think that is very erroneous. I think it was more of an understanding of the various aspects of nature, such as the God of the sun. Okay, that's one aspect of nature. The goddess of the sky, that's another element of nature. So we really need to kind of rethink how the ancient Egyptians have been portrayed in religion and get a better understanding. But I think that has been calculated to some extent to place them in a negative light, while at the same time the Western religions have used ancient Egypt as a foundation to develop their own religions, if you will. Okay, and therefore coming up with the so-called one God as an umbrella of everything. But that really removes us away from nature and places us focusing in on really objects, such as a so-called Jesus the Christ. How can you reduce nature, okay, and the whole universe into one image? It's just not possible. So it causes us to limit our thinking and to disregard so much around us and almost make it seem like a crime for us to think about nature, such as the sun. And we know that the S-U-N is really the focus as opposed to the perverted S-O-N. It's sort of been a play on words there. And we have to remember that we had playwrights writing much of the literature that religion is based on.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
When does that happen?
that happened many, many years ago. We can think about Desiderius Erasmus. He was a major playwright during the Renaissance period. And as a matter of fact, he later wrote the book Praise of Folly, kind of making fun of the fact that all these little cutesy kind of things had taken place, and really thought his works would never be accepted, but they were. I mean, after all, he was commissioned to write something, but he just took the most outlandish and ridiculous point of view and really felt that he would be challenged. But because his writing was, I guess, so good that they accepted it, and that's what we have today, that we really accept as truth, when in a sense it was a big joke, and now the joke's on us. But thinking about one of the questions that you asked me, if we move away from these images that have been given us, how would we do? We would do so much better, because the images that have been given to us are European images for the most part. Look at the three major religions, and all three have central figures that are European. And that's no accident, because again, going back into ancient Egypt, when Alexander the Greek invaded there, they wanted to have themselves accepted, and when they couldn't get that, of course, Professor Williams has discussed that with you, then they wanted their image accepted. So that is the image of the European that we have today in Christianity, and of course that's the same image that we have in Islam without a face. Okay, so this goes on and on. So what that does, I feel, to us on a psychological level, it keeps us bowing down to something, first, that is not real. Secondly, to something that is white and does not look like us. Okay, I'm not a racist in saying this, but we seem to be the only folks who worship something that doesn't look anything like them. So therefore, that has to undermine the psychological health of an individual to bow down to something that's not looking like him at all. And not only that, but to put their spirituality into the same image, as opposed to remaining in touch with themselves and understanding their own spirituality. Again, you have a perversion here. While we worship our ancestors, or let's put it like this, not so much a worship but a paying of homage to our ancestors, back in Africa, we've been given someone else's ancestor, if you will, to pay homage to. So therefore, that is very damaging because that causes us to kind of negate or not consider that the things that our ancestors have taught and left here for us. So I feel that it's very damaging.
Mm-hmm. Let me follow up on that with another question, Sister Arnetta. You said that it would free our mind. What do you think a free mind could produce?
Many, many things. Just as our ancestors, our ancient Egyptian ancestors, developed civilization, and you think about all the things, starting with writing, which of course determines that a culture is a civilization, if you will, as well as the paper that we write with, the many things that have been mentioned, the furniture, it goes on and on, the building of buildings, mathematics, an understanding of astrology, astronomy, all those things they were able to get in touch with and pass along to us. And while the picture looks bleak now, it's not as bleak as it may seem. We're still doing wonderful things. We've never stopped doing wonderful things. We developed the light bulb, Lewis Latimer. He came up with the filament for the light bulb and later came up with the globe that covers the light bulb. So therefore we have modernization, we have light as a result of one of our own Africans. Okay, the telephone, we wouldn't have that today if one of the brothers had not developed the transmitter for the telephone. Okay, Granville T. Woods. Nor would we have, well, let's put it like this. A lot of people want to give Alexander Graham Bell credit for that. And what he did was to get the patent on that, but not alone. Again, he had Lewis Latimer assisting him in developing the drawings, the application, the whole bit. He was the recipient because, you know, back then we could not get patents.
Correct.
So again, we've been very instrumental. The telephone, even the cell phone today, the fiber optics that carry communication all around the world. We're in the forefront of all of that. We have many scientists sitting right now today in Bell Laboratories within Lucent Technologies with many, many patents. 50, 100, many patents, okay, where things are constantly being improved and we're relying upon them to further modernize the world, the technology of communication. We're in the forefront of that. So really, all of our minds have not been totally captured. There are many people who happen to follow a religion who were able to do some wonderful things. But I think where the problem comes in, a lot of us, we really don't know who we are. And so therefore, we do not make the best of our talents. If we're lucky enough to have parents or to be around folks who are doing positive things and who do have an understanding about our spirituality, we fare well. And we've probably fared much better. We could fare much better if we did not have religion there standing in our way, because it keeps us focused in on something else other than realizing our own talents and our full potential. So a free mind would bring, I mean, it's awesome. It's overwhelming to think what we could do if we did not have these stumbling blocks that have been put in our place to more or less control our thinking. Because I think in a lot of ways religion does limit our thinking. Okay, it tries to put a ceiling on us. So I think not only in terms of the development of physical things, but in terms of understanding our own spirituality. Again, you just wonder what could take place if folk really understood their own spiritual power that they have within themselves to make things happen, to make certain decisions and to see those things actually come into being. Many people are aware of that. I'm not saying that everyone is not, but I think about our young people and many of them and how they seem kind of lost, angry, and bitter because of what we're continuing to see on television, that tends to portray us in a negative light. It instills a kind of anger. And I think if that changed, we wouldn't have as much of the crime that we have, or people feeling so hopeless. The young brother standing on the corner selling dope and all this. They don't need to put their minds into this. They can make a conscious decision that this is not the way I'm going to earn mine. I'm going to be much more creative than this. And some of the brothers are understanding that. We have our rappers, they're telling a story, okay? And of course, we're the creators of jazz, which is the foundation of the music that we now have today. We're the creators of blues. All of that is being removed from us. So it goes on and on. We're in every venue there possibly is of human life. We're doing something there, but it's so much more that we could do. And I think as important, it needs to be publicized a little bit more. It's a lot more publicized than it used to be, but there is still a lot of our white or European brothers and sisters out there who feel that we're not contributing. You take a Matt Hale here in Illinois, excuse me, who was behind the rampage where folks went out and killed a brother, shot up some Jewish folk, if you will. Okay, that's what they call them, but we know there are people who practice a religion called Judaism. But to have that kind of hatred and to pass out literature saying that there has not been any contributions by us, that is total ignorance. But that is a prevalent idea out there. I'm not sure if it's denial, because so many things are evident. But I think if what we are doing positively is publicized more, and we can thank the media too for their negative news in the evening. Okay, we usually see pastors out there. I'm not knocking pastors at this point, although I feel that there are tools that are keeping us subdued and in our place, if you will. Okay, but not to go all over the board. There is so much more positive press that we could receive that would change the relationship between us, ourselves, with each other, see each other in a more positive light, have us not afraid of each other, okay? Realizing that the adults are responsible for the children to see that they have information that they need. And it would change our relationship with the other races of people because they would have to view us differently.
Mm-hmm. I just want to throw something at you, just for a moment. And I know you can explain this simply enough. When you say clogging up our minds, worshiping white images and clogging up our minds and so forth. One of the problems I feel, the reason why our folk can't pull away from it is they think that they need, because we're deeply spiritual, that we need something to hold on to in the God realm to guide us, and to pull away from the church might leave us void and empty with no spiritual adherence out there. So what would you say to people who feel that pulling away would render us less able to cope with life because we have nothing to hold on to?
Okay, that's quite a question. Okay, I think it's a fallacy that we would be less spiritually somehow. First of all, our spirituality is within us, okay? So that's something that we would have to be retrained to understand. We have been trained into an understanding that we need religion in order to be made whole, okay? No, religion needs us in order to give it spirituality. Without us, it's dead, okay? Without our belief injected into it, there would be nothing there, okay? So if it's just a reverse, and I find that so interesting that we've been trained to think one thing, and the reality of it is that we're making it whole. It is not making us whole. So we're taking our spirituality into it and really continuing to give that validation, okay? And the other thing that we have been trained into is that we need it in order to get to heaven or to hell. Okay, there's a fear tactic there. Okay, lots of people are bound to religion because of fear. Okay, we've been trained that we need a church in order to get married, in order to have a place to be buried from when we die somehow. That it's the thing to do. So we have to be careful about observing all the rituals that we have been given. So it's going to require a retraining of the thinking processes that have been put upon us. We are whole. We have an understanding inwardly about certain things. We have that little still small voice that we had before we knew anything about a religion. Our intuition that is with us, has always been with us, will be with us when religions are no longer here. Religions have not always existed. There was a time and a place that they came into existence. So I think if we can begin to understand that, we're going to be so much further ahead. As a matter of fact, again, I think we could do so much more without religion, because religion tends to, it limits us too in that we're constantly trying to figure out in religion, are we doing it right? Is this the way to do it? How do I pray? You know, when we, who do I pray to? Is this right? Is this wrong? So the Christians say one thing, the Muslims say something else, the Buddhists say something else. It goes on and on. So what we need to do is to get in touch with ourselves. And by focusing in on the outer, that steers us away from ourselves and takes us to all these other things that really are not real, that came out of the imagination of other people. So I say if our minds were free to think freely, do our own imagining, do our own musing, do our own daydreaming, do our own wanderings, instead of trying to figure out the wanderings of others and the musings of others, we would be that much further ahead.
And finally, how do you think other people would react to us as a people if we did pull out of those religions? What would happen to those around us?
Do you mean
what would be
our
the
own
interrelationship with, say, America to African, to blacks, to ancient Egypt here in America? If we pull away from worshiping Christianity and Islam and all those gods and begin to move to ourselves, what do you think would be the results of that?
I think if we all had the facts, it would not be as disruptive as one might think. Okay, in other words, if we're educated to the facts of who we are spiritually, and they're educated to who they are spiritually, and also if they understand our history, okay, which is a part of their history, that someone among their own people came in and more or less perverted that which was natural, I think we could all get a better understanding. We would be all the better for it, that there are some alternatives here. You know, when you think about, see, there's a distinct difference between organized religion and spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think if we can come into a better understanding about that,
can you touch on it?
That's going to place the entire human race way ahead. And I think we could be more on one accord than apart from each other. And particularly with the idea of all that we described earlier as far as these images that we've been given, whether we know it or not, that really plays into the idea of white supremacy. And that hurts us all, because it places someone above and someone below, when it's not like that at all. Okay? We're the phrase "we're all created equal" and all that, it's more to that than we realize. Okay? We are a part of that. If we wanted to get cocky about it, we could say, well, the Creator used us to bring forth civilization, okay, and not Europeans. But that's not what this is all about. It's about harmony. It's about getting back to our, well, we could talk about Mayat, you know, the spiritual laws, and no one's above anyone. So really, if we begin to get back to the basics, everybody will begin to understand it's no need for all of the conflict and the confusion, that it's enough here for everybody, because a lot of it is about greed. Okay? So if you place yourself superior, then you feel more entitled. Okay? So let's face it, even when talking about affirmative action, it has always been affirmative for the European. It's us who've tried to struggle and get part of the pie that's out there for us. So I might have veered a little bit. So if there's something that I did not answer, please feel free to bring it.
No, I just wanted you to, when I said, when you mentioned spirituality, I know you've covered that before. It's just two other questions I wanted to ask you. But I wanted you to open up a little more so people can get a little deeper understanding between religion and spirituality, so that if one is contemplating going into themselves or trying to find their own spirituality, they don't have to feel so threatened that if they left the church, if they left God, if they left organized religion, that they don't have anything. So
Okay.
if you can kind of explain the spirituality a little better.
Okay. Again, our spirituality is within, and we're always connected to that which created us. Okay, we call that the Creator. So we're never separated from that, and I think if folk can understand that's helpful. Wherever you are, you're connected. Okay, and it doesn't matter where that is. You're not any more connected if you're in a church. With that, probably less, really, because you're so focused in on what's outside. And again, religion, what is it tying us back to? When you think about it, let's take the Bible for example. That is the story of another people. It's not a story of us. For the most part, the Old Testament, that's the story about the so-called Hebrew people. Okay, it's not our story. Okay, although there are elements in there about us, and a lot of that's negative. Yes, if we had enough knowledge to make some of that positive, such as knowing that the Ten Commandments foundation is back in ancient Egypt. Okay, so we really need to get back to the source. Okay, so religion has taken us into many directions, okay, and into a lot of confusion. As you know, many lives have been spent trying to decipher what was meant, and it's all subject to interpretation, okay? There are very few facts there, and like I said, what's in there about us can be very negative, like the curse of Ham. What does that mean? You know, there's no way that the entire human race all came from two individuals. I mean, it goes on and on, the absurd kind of premises that are put forth and that people walk away with. Okay, so organized religion is a tool. It's designed, I feel, to keep us in our place, if you will. And it does. Again, it gets back to a chosen people, and so therefore those chosen people, chosen of who? You know. Okay. So we really have to. So does that mean that someone else has been left out? You know, you just. So it's all playing on the mind. So we're constantly striving to get to something that's unreal, unrealistic. We just cannot keep our spirituality tied up like that. So therefore, we're not free to move forward in doing many of the things that we could do to make our lives better and to make us feel good about ourselves. I remember many years ago, in going to church, I often felt like I had just left a funeral when I left. And that was probably because I had left a part of my spirituality there. And just really just confused and not understanding what had gone on. Okay, so I see it more as a detriment for us. And I know some talk about assembling together, but we need to look for alternatives, you know, within our community. We have, there are alternatives out there now. You have spiritual centers where it's not so much preaching going on, and that's another thing. We've gotten used to someone just standing, talking to us, and telling us their perspective on it. Well, do they ever ask, well, what do you think? Very seldom do you have an opportunity to ask questions in that kind of a setting. So how much can you grow? So, I mean, it just goes on and on. So our spirituality is something that we want to get back to. Listening to that wee small voice, following our intuition, following our hunches. And we know deep down within us what is right and what is wrong. We know these things. We don't need to look at the religion and see all the hypocrisy that often is associated with that causes so many to become discouraged. Okay? And folk would not be leaving God. They would be making more of a connection with their own creator. Okay? So we're not, when we say God, we have to be very careful. I know that we're running out of time now, but God is a male deity. Okay? And then we forget about goddess. And somehow we want to make God everything that there is, but we use the term creation because it encompasses all living things, males, females, plants, flowers, trees, all the natural resources, all the things that we use to create other things with. So we see it much more expansively. So I think, again, that's to give an illustration of how our thinking has been limited. Okay, so some things we need to look up for ourselves. We need to research them for ourselves. Just go to the dictionary. What is God? And what is goddess? What do these terms mean? We need to look. And I think that's one of the things that might slightly set us apart. We're curious about all the words. What was the original meaning of this word? And that leads you possibly to something else to understand where this concept came from, because so many concepts have changed from what they were originally. So it would behoove all of us to study on our own and to constantly research questionable items, don't take anything for granted, and to really, again, listen to that wee small voice within us that we were given by our Creator.
I want to thank you so very much, Sister Arnetta.
You're very welcome.
Did you?
And I would like to add one other thing. Religion was given to us by man and not the Creator. Okay, so that is a very key point. And we have to question why religion was given to us. But we were born with our spirituality. And again, it will always be with us.